today we will discuss about the Java exception handling. So first we will discuss the introduction to the exception handling. So in Java, exception handling is a powerful mechanism that allows developers or software engineers to manage the runtime errors in their code. So without crashing a program means once you are executing the program, so while compiling time or runtime there may be some errors. Those errors, so without disturbing the program, we have to execute the remaining program, that is the exception handling. So what is exception in Java? An exception is a problem, one problem that is during the execution of a program, either execution or compile time. So when an exception occurs, the normal flow of the program is disrupted. So when is the problem occurs, anything occurs in our daily life, then some disturbance is there. Like that, while you are writing the code, after writing the code, you have to execute your code. While executing the code, if any error occurs, then your program will disturb and an application terminate abundantly. So which is not recommended in the real time. So that's why we have to handle the exceptions in Java. Either those exceptions are either compile time or runtime exceptions. So an exception is an event. So exception also called as an event. So it disturbs the normal flow of your program during your program execution, So now I will give some examples of the exceptions in Java. So dividing a number by 0, some number dividing by 0 is an exception. So next one is the access an array index out of bounds. So what is meant by, suppose in our array we have the 10 elements or 10 items. If you want to access the 11th element, then it is lead to the exception, that is called the accessing an array index out of bounds. Next one, trying to open the file does not exist. Suppose if you are working with the file streams, so in your system whatever you mention in the program, that file name is not there in your system, then it will occur the file not found exceptions. These are some examples of the exceptions in Java. First one is the dividing a number by 0. Second one is the accessing an array index without bounds. Third one is the trying to open file that does not exist. These are the 3 sample exceptions. So next, what are the major reasons why an exception occurs? So now we have to discuss what are the reasons to occur an exception in any program. So exceptions can occur due to between the several reasons. So what are those reasons? Now we will. So invalid user input. So if you want to give the input as number, instead of number if you give the character as input, then only exception will occur. Next, device failure. Suppose if you are working with your programming or anything project, so unfortunately your device crashed, then exception will occur. Next, loss of network connection. So if you are working your project on the online, if the internet connection is lost, then it will not work. Next one is the physical limitations, out of disk memory. Suppose your disk memory is 1 GB, so after 1 GB it will show an exception. So next one is the code errors. Code errors means while writing the syntactical error, grammatical errors, like this errors. So next one is the out of bound. Already previously I said out of bound means if you are accessing the 11th element in your array or list, you have only 10 elements. So if you are accessing the 11th element, it is the out of bound. Null references. So in null reference there is no value. If you are accessing the null values, then it will lead to the exception. Next one is the type mismatch. Type mismatch means suppose if you gave the one data type as integer, suppose if you are giving the float data type, then it will mismatch and it will leads to the exception. Next one is the opening an unavailable file. Suppose if you are accessing there is no such type of file in your system. If you want to access that file, then it will leads to an exception. Next one is the database error. Suppose if you want to connect to the database means DBMS or DBMS, SQL, Oracle, like this databases are there. If there is any error in database, then it leads to an exception. Next one is the arithmetic errors. These are the runtime errors. If any mathematical illegal is mismatching to the arithmetic operations, then it will leads to an exceptions. These are the reasons to occur an exception in any programming languages. So we will discuss now what are the types of exceptions in Java programming language. We have the two types of Java programming language exceptions. One is built-in exceptions and another one is the user-defined exception. So built-in exceptions, again we have the two types, checked exception and unchecked exceptions. So we will discuss what is meant by the built-in exception, what is meant by the checked exception, what is meant by the unchecked exception, and what is meant by the user-defined exception. So this is the diagram. It displays the types of exceptions. What are the user-defined exceptions and built-in exceptions. User-defined exceptions means whatever we are creating our own exceptions, those are called the user-defined exceptions. Again, built-in exceptions means like already built-in in the compiler will give some exceptions. So built-in exceptions are two types again, checked exceptions and the unchecked exceptions. So again, checked exceptions we have some types: class not found exception, interrupted exception, IO exception, instantiation exception, SQL exception, and the file not found exception. Next, unchecked exceptions are the arithmetic exceptions, class cast exception, null pointer exception, and the array index out of bound exceptions, array store exception, and the illegal thread state exception. These are the types of exceptions in Java. So now we will discuss one by one. So built-in exceptions. What is meant by the built-in exceptions? Built-in exceptions are the predefined exception classes provided by the Java to handle common errors during the program execution. While program executions, some predefined exceptions will Java compiler will provide. So again, it has built-in exceptions are two types, checked exceptions and the unchecked exceptions. So we will discuss about the checked exception. What is meant by the checked exception? Checked exceptions are the called compile time exceptions. Means while after writing the code, Java code, you have to compile your program for checking errors if there is any syntactical errors or grammatical errors. Such type of errors are called the compile time errors or checked exceptions. Checked exceptions are compile time exceptions. So what are the checked exceptions or compiled exceptions we will discuss now. So first one is the class not found exception. So when it throws class not found exception, say when the program tries to load a class at runtime, so while execution your program loads a particular class. So if that class does not found in your program in anywhere in the program, then this class not found exception will occur. Next one is the interrupted exception. So what is meant by the interrupted exception? When you are working with two threads concept, so one thread is paused and another thread is interrupted it. So if you are working with two threads, one thread is paused, so second thread is interrupted the first thread, then that time interrupted exception will occur. Next one is the IO exception, input output exception. When it will occur? So when you are performing the input output operations, so if it is failed, suppose user gives the input instead of characters, if the user giving the numerical values, then it will leads to the input output exception. Next one is the instantiation exception. What is meant by this one? So when the program tries to create an object of a class but fails because the class is abstract, an interface, or has no default constructor. See, what is the meaning of instantiation exception? So when program tries to create an object for a particular class, then that time it will fail. Why? So why? Because if you use the abstract class in your program, so you cannot create the instance for a abstract class. If you are using the interfaces in your program, you cannot create the instance for a interfaces. Or if you don't have any default constructors in your class, then instantiation exception leads to your program. Next one is the SQL exception. So SQL stands for the standard query language. So while you are working with databases, so database connections, if you want to store the data in a database, if you want to fetch the data from the database, SQL is needed. So if there is any errors in the database or in your database connection, then SQL exception leads. Next one is the file not found exception. What is meant by the file not found exception? Suppose if you are working with the files in your project or in your code, suppose if you want to access any file, that file has to exist in your system or somewhere else in the server. If that file name is not exist in your system or somewhere else in the server, then file not found exception leads. Next one is the unchecked exceptions. So what is meant by the unchecked exceptions? The unchecked exceptions are just these are the opposite to the checked exceptions. The compiler will not check these exceptions. So checked exceptions, the compiler will unable to check the unchecked exceptions. These exceptions will occur while running your program or running your project, while execution your program or while executing your project. So unchecked exceptions are also called the runtime exceptions. Runtime exceptions. Again we have the unchecked types of unchecked exceptions. Now we will discuss what are the unchecked exceptions. So these are the unchecked exceptions. First one is the arithmetic exception. So when it will occur in your program, when there is a illegal math operations. Suppose there is a if we want to perform the mathematical arithmetic operation, instead of, suppose if you want to perform the arithmetic operations on the numbers 1 plus 2, 2 plus 2 minus 1, like this. Suppose if you are performing the, instead of addition, if you are performing the multiplication, then such type of times it will leads to the arithmetic exceptions. Next one is the class cast exception. What is meant by the class cast exception? So when you are trying to cast an object to a class, it does not belongs to this two. So if you created a one object for a particular class, if you want to access that object, so that particular object is not belongs to that particular class, then it will leads to the class cast exception. Next one is the null pointer exception. What is meant by the null pointer exception? It is thrown when you try to use the null object, accessing its methods or fields. So if you are accessing the null pointers, means null values, null object, null value means that nothing is there. If you want to access null values, such type of values, then null pointer exception will occur in your program or in your project. Next one is the array index out of bounds exception. So when it will occurs in your program or in your project. So if you want to access the array elements, suppose if you are in your array, you have the only 10 elements are there. If you want to access the 11th element, or if you want to access the -1 indexed value, so such type of invalid indexes if you want to access, then the time array index out of bounds exception will occur in your program or in your project. Next one is the array store exception. What is meant by this one? Suppose I created a one array, so my array size is only 5. I want to store the 6th element, then it will occur a exception. Next one is the illegal thread state exception. What is meant by this one? So when it will occur, so when a thread operation is not allowed in its current state. Suppose if you are working with the threads, so if you are accessing the one thread state, so that thread is not the current state in your whatever you are accessing the state, that thread is not in that state. So then the time it will occur, it will happens to the illegal thread state exception. Now we will discuss the user defined exceptions. So what is meant by user defined exceptions? So sometimes The built-in exceptions in Java are not able to describe a certain situation errors. Sometimes the Java compiler or Java exceptions are unable to handle the some errors. Such type of errors you have to handle manually. So whatever you are handling the exceptions manually, those exceptions are called the user defined exception. So I mentioned some user defined exceptions here. Print stack trace, what is the purpose of this method? This is the one method. Using this method you can handle your own exceptions. So using this you can stack means you can trace the your exception and exception name. What is that exception, where it is located in your program. So such type of things using this method you can trace. Next one is the toString. What is the purpose of this toString method? So using this you can provide the exception information in which format it is there and name of the exception, that's it. So using this you can just tell the user to so exception name either it is in which format. Next one is the get message. So using the get message method you can provide the description of the exception. So based on using these three methods you can handle the user defined exceptions. So we have the Java exception hierarchy. So we have to follow the hierarchy. Suppose if you want to become a professional, first you have to join in the LKG, UKG, nursery, first class, second class, third class, fourth class, like this. One type of hierarchy is there to become a professional person. Like that here also we have the some hierarchy for the Java exceptions. So we will discuss now that hierarchy. So all exception classes are subtypes of the java.lang exception classes. So we have a java.lang package in Java, that is the default package. In that package we have the exception class. In exception class we have all these unchecked exceptions, checked exceptions, user defined exceptions and built-in exceptions. So apart from exceptions class we have a one more class. That class is called the error. So which class is derived from the throwable class. So we are deriving the error is a subclass of the throwable class. We have the main class, that is the exception class. In that exception class we have all these exceptions. Next one is the errors are abnormal conditions that happen in case of several failures. These are not handled by in the Java programs. Errors are generated in indicate errors generated by the runtime environments. So sometimes while compile time some errors are not captured by the Java compiler, then those errors we will trace while executing the program. Such type of errors are called the runtime errors. So this is the hierarchy of the diagrammatical I mentioned here. First we have the java.lang package. After that we have the object. Under object we have a throwable class. Under that class we have the errors, exceptions, again exceptions, runtime exceptions and other exceptions. How we can handle the exceptions? Till now we discussed what is exception, what is a error, so what are the exceptions are there, checked exceptions, unchecked exceptions, built-in exceptions, user defined exceptions. So these are the what are the exceptions, how they occurred in your Java program. So how we can find out those exceptions or how we can handle those exceptions in Java program, now we will discuss. So we have the some keywords in Java to handle the exceptions: try, catch, finally, throw, throws. Using these keywords you can handle the exceptions in Java. So what are those keywords? Try, catch, finally, throw, throws. So what is the purpose of the try keyword. So it defines a block of code to test for errors. Suppose if you write the some code, so that code will be under the try block. So why we need the try block means, so whatever you wrote the code, so in that code if there is any errors we have to test. For that purpose we have to use the try. Next one is the catch. So what is the purpose of the catch? It defines a block of code to handle the error. It defines the block of code to handle the errors. Whatever you trace the errors in try block, those are moved to the catch. So catch will show you the error type, error description, all the things. So next one is the finally. What is meant by the finally? So once an error occurred in your program will terminate. Means the remaining, suppose if you wrote the 20 lines of code, so an error occurred at the 10th line. So then that time remaining 10 lines also terminated without execution. So if you use the finally keyword, so whenever error occurred, except that remaining lines will be executed. We will execute the remaining lines. That is the purpose of the finally. Next, throw. Throw will show the only one exception. So using, what is the meaning of the throws? Throws will show you the multiple exceptions at a time. So this is the syntax for the try catch. See, first we have to write the try. Under that try we have to write the some code. After that we have to write the catch block. Under catch block, so we have the exception type. Which type of exception? So E is the here object of the exception type class, and we have to handle the exception code. And finally means we have to, this is the optional, this is the finally is the optional, you can use or you cannot use. So we can execute the remaining code. So this is the example program for the exception. What is this? Built-in exception or checked exception. So here I am creating the one class. My class name is the example. So public static void main is the main program. After that I am using the try. In try I am keeping the some code. So integer a is equal to 10 by 0. So any number can't divided by the 0. That is the exception sentences. So after that I am using the catch. In catch, that is belongs to the arithmetic operation. Division is the arithmetic operation. That's why I am using the arithmetic exception, and I am creating the one object for that exception, and I am printing a system.out.println cannot divided by 0, means any number cannot divided by the 0. Next one, finally system.out, this will always execute. So means whatever you mention the within the final block, those sentence will execute always. So this is the example program for the exception. Next one is the, we will discuss about the throw and throws. So throw is a keyword. Using this throw you can handle the exceptions explicitly. It can throw only one exception at a time. So next one is the throws. Throws also one keyword. You can use it to declare the multiple exceptions. Using throws keyword you can declare the multiple exceptions. So you have to maintain the comma between the exceptions separated by comma. So this is the example program for the throw and throws. So public class test is the class name and main. So throw new arithmetic exception we are manually thrown. After that throws, my class name is the file test. Public static void main is the main program. After that file reader fr is equal to new file reader. File reader is a one class. Using that we are reading the files in our system or local system or server system. So using new keyword we are creating the object. Fr is a object. So file name is the abc.txt. So this is the example program for the throws and throw. So next one is the multiple catch blocks. What is meant by the multiple catch blocks? So we can mention the multiple catches after try block. So this is the example program for that one. Try integer a is equal to 5 by 0. Any number cannot divided by the 0. Again catch arithmetic exception. Again after system.out.println I mentioned the one more catch exception E. So this is I am printing the general error. So like this you can mention the number of catches under one try block. Next one is the nested try catch. What is meant by the nested try? Nested means one try within the another try is known as the nested try. So we can mention the try within the try is known as the nested try. Catch within the catch is also nested catch. So you can mention the two try blocks within a one program and number of catch blocks within the one try block. So this is the example program. I mentioned the same as in the above program, but here I mentioned that nested try and catch blocks. Thank you.